It's now 6:30. You can start.
I will now call to order the Thursday, April 25th, 2024 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Good evening, commissioners. Good to see you after a hiatus. Staff, thank you for being here, and welcome to those watching at home. We will start with item 2, public comment. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
We have no one signed up.
Then we'll move to the item 3A, consideration of and action on the minutes of the February 13 and February 22nd, 2024 meetings. Those minutes are in your packets. Any changes to the minutes?
Motion to approve.
We've got a motion to approve by Commissioner Landine. We've got a second by Commissioner Brown. Any discussion? Please vote. That motion will pass. We'll see by how wide of a margin. Okay, I don't see it anymore. Is Commissioner Smith's vote recorded?
I did.
Okay, I can't see it anymore. I assume you voted to approve. Is that accurate? All right, well, that passes unanimously among the commissioners present. We will go to item 4A, consideration of an action on an authorization of a preliminary plat extension for New Territory Detention Expansion Number 1. We've got Laura. Good evening.
Okay, thank you. So, gonna be pretty quick. Plat extensions, again, it's not necessarily re-arbitrating the plat, but just extending the approval deadline one more year. This is for a preliminary plat. This is in the ETJ at Sartarsha near Pecan Grove. This is for the LID. They are working to acquire property and extend, they're actually extending and rerouting Sartarsha right-of-way. They need a little bit more time to get the right-of-way installed and then accepted and the old one abandoned before they can come before you with the final plat. So just needed that extension to be able to work through some of those legalities. Again, this is the preliminary plat that was approved, so it's just extending the approval of this plat before you. And staff does recommend approval of that extension.
Okay, any questions for staff? All right, I'll make a motion that we approve an authorization for a preliminary plat extension for New Territory Detention Expansion Number 1. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Got a second by Commissioner Landine. If there's no other discussion, please vote. That passes unanimously among members present. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, commissioners. Item 5, public hearing. Well, let's see, how are we going to do this first? So the item is going to be, and I won't open the public hearing yet, but I guess the discussion here is the proposed amendments to Chapter 2 and 10 of the Land Development Code. And Jessica, are you going to give us a presentation on that?
Laura and I both.
Both of you. All right, let me amend the minutes here. All right, so what we'll do is we'll hear the presentation, then I'll open the public hearing, and then we'll move on to consideration and action. All right, go ahead.
Perfect. So just for y'all to know, tonight there was quite a few lists of red lines, but primarily it's going to be some small clarification amendments to our standard district regulations. And then Jess is going to talk about the wine bar that we've added to the land use matrix and some other amendments to the specialty district, the Lake Point redevelopment district that y'all approved last fall. Then we'll have that public hearing and ask questions. There will be some next steps, including going to council and having that action. And then we're going to push all of these to our online publishing As part of that push to online, there will be a few Scrivener's errors. Those are going to be things like misspelling, a couple of places where a space was left out, and some renumbering of sections in order to make everything align. All of those are going to be handled through that online publishing process. So that's allowed through that section 1-11, which allows the director to make some Scrivener's errors. So the changes to the standard district regulations start out with some clarifying language for CUPs regarding reconsideration, just to make sure that it aligns with PD districts. That's going to be a real quick adjustment so that instead of 6 months from the filing of the application, it'll be 6 months from denial of the application for you to be able to go reapply and for reconsideration. We went ahead and removed references to ancillary uses throughout all the other sections because ancillary uses were removed from the land use matrix in the previous amendment from just a couple months ago. We have allowed patio covers as an allowed yard obstruction in the required side and rear yard. This is kind of a furtheration of an amendment that came forward about 2 years ago to allow patio covers to be between a house and a garage. We're now allowing them kind of on the rear and sides of the houses and garages just to allow for people to be able to build kind of in their own space, so long as it is that patio cover, unenclosed area. We've also clarified that the maximum square footage of accessory structures in a rear yard does not apply to garages. That's going to apply to sheds and other accessory structures. And then we also removed children's playhouse from the definition of an accessory structure because it's not an accessory structure per the defined term. It is an allowed yard obstruction, more in line with patio cover, so it can go in your rear yard. Part of the standard district regulations that we have changed to support the Lake Point redevelopment district is to clarify that stoops and porches cannot project more than 5 feet into a required yard. That's primarily because the yard is only 5 feet wide in most of the Lake Point redevelopment district. We've also aligned the definition of multifamily dwelling that's in the land use matrix to match the language in the Lake Point redevelopment district. We've clarified that the residential landscape regulations that are standard in the rest of the city do not apply to Lake Point redevelopment. They have their own regulations that are set up in that chapter. That's where that paper in front of you comes into play. It was accidentally put into the wrong section. It was put into the section for non-residential. So in the PDF version that y'all got last week in preparation, it was in the wrong section. So it should go in that first paragraph in section 2-384, not 385. We've also just kind of added that language for you to help you when you make your motion to make sure that the condition is included in the motion to move it to the correct section. And then we've also added mu as a defined term, and Jessica will talk more about that in just a few minutes as part of the Lake Point redevelopment updates. And I will pass it off to her.
Hello. So one of the larger changes that are included in this proposed amendment is the addition of wine bar as a permitted use in the B1, B2, and then the LPR districts. This is part of our ongoing effort to expand the uses that are permitted in our commercial districts, because we've heard from commercial property owners that one of the barriers to redevelopment is zoning. And we've also seen with the citizen satisfaction survey that it's very important to residents to have access to restaurants and entertainment. Moving on to the changes to the Lake Point redevelopment district. Again, like Laura was saying, that's in a separate document just because that, while it's in chapter 2, it was recently approved and we wanted to make sure that you guys had the whole code because some of those changes, we just wanted you to be able to see the code as a whole. So starting with section 2-118, district regulations, we've made a few changes to the table 2-118.2 bulk regulations for middle housing development. One of those changes includes reducing the minimum interior side setback for duplexes and townhomes from 6 feet to 3 feet. So we just found that to be more in line with a walkable and denser community, that we should allow that flexibility to have a smaller setback. We also added a clarification that because of the addition of a mu, that when you are measuring your front setback, that it's only measured from the back of the pedestrian realm when you are fronting on a street. Moving on to section 2-119, lot layout and site design regulations. This is the pedestrian realm section, and so we added some clarifications to the table 2-11.1 pedestrian realm requirements by roadway classification. As we were reevaluating, we found that 10 feet for a clear zone or the sidewalk was a little excessive adjacent to middle housing developments. The intent of that wider sidewalk was to support the pedestrian flow, the heavier pedestrian traffic, but that's really going to be found more along those commercial properties and those mixed-use developments. So that clarification and the addition of a reference that the minimum clear zone width is 5 feet adjacent to middle housing on type 2 streets. We also added a clarification to this section that on-street parking may be permitted within the pedestrian enhancement zone along type 2 streets. And then the image below just shows the distinction between the clear zone, which is also known as the sidewalk, and then the pedestrian enhancement zone. So further down in the same section, section 2-119, this is to private garages and service parking for middle housing. We found, again, that we want to support that denser development, and so we reduced this minimum setback for garages along the alley, because all homes should be rear loaded, to 5 feet. But if the garage is to be set back any further than 5 feet, that it should be at least 18 feet to support the parking of a vehicular car. And then we revised figure 2-119E to show that 18-foot setback rather than the 20-foot setback. And then moving on to section 2-122, building design, middle housing development. We added a clarification that middle housing developments can front on a street, a civic space, or a MU. Originally, it stated that buildings shall have at least one entrance accessible from the pedestrian realm. We just found that wasn't really practical to have each home fronting on a street. So we wanted to allow a little bit more flexibility while also maintaining that intent of connectivity. So we added some standards for a MU, that it shall be a minimum of 15 feet wide, measured from property line to property line, and include a 5-foot wide paved walkway that connects and provides pedestrian access from each dwelling unit to a street and civic space. And then, of course, we added the definition for MU since it's a new term, and it's a designated public green space that dwelling units can front on that provides pedestrian connectivity to streets or civic space, and that MU shall be owned and maintained by a homeowners association or other perpetual entity. Because this is a text amendment, we met all of the public hearing requirements. The notification was published in the newspaper as well as posted on the city's website. At this time, we have not received any inquiries and are not aware of any opposition to the proposed amendment. So with that, staff supports the recommendation of approval with the following condition that Laura mentioned earlier, that the language regarding residential landscaping in the Lake Point redevelopment district is moved from section 2-385 to section 2-384. And after the public hearing, Laura and I are available to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thanks very much. Let's do it like this. At this time, I will open the public hearing. We will receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on a proposed amendment to chapters 2 and 10 of the Land Development Code. Do we have anyone that wishes to address this issue in public hearing? Does anyone want to come up and talk about their dad? No? Okay. All right, going once, twice, no one, last call for public hearing? All right, I'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to consideration and action. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Smith.
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation. One thing that I wanted to clarify, and I couldn't remember what we did with the multifamily for Lake Point, but what did we do for dwellings that may be from 3 to 6? So what if you have a townhouse that's like 4? I know we got rid of cottages, but we could still have like a fourplex, but we don't have a definition for it now.
So we do. It's called the multiplex, and it is allowed in the Lake Point redevelopment district.
But did we,
It is not allowed in the standard residential chart, but it is allowed in the Lake Point chart. The only change regarding multifamily was to allow it, it aligned it with the definition that is in LPR. So in the rest of residential districts outside of the LPR, you cannot have a building with a unit more than a duplex or less than 7 units.
So it's just not allowed.
Yes, in the rest of the city. It is allowed in Lake Point under the use multiplex.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily fully align, but it's allowed in Lake Point, but you just clarified it in this for the remainder of the.
Yes, yes. It's primarily about the definition, to make sure that the definition in Chapter 10 aligns with the definition of multifamily everywhere in the
Okay.
city.
Gotcha. So the other thing that was confusing to me is that when, and it's one of these sections that you gave us before we started the meeting, is that like on page 87 and on page 90 and 91, there's a comment that this is the way it works for this document, except for Lake Point or except for the Hill Residential District. So when you put that in there, would that mean that, well, the rest of the document then is part of the district? It was confusing to me that you used just in those specific areas that you said, well, okay, it's everything but this, but it doesn't apply to Lake Point or apply to.
Yes, that means that those regulations would apply to, in this case, it'll be to residential property that's not in Lake Point or the Hill, follows that paragraph that you see.
But then would it be construed that the rest of it is like Lake Point and the Hill? I mean,
So
it just seemed odd that you just, for like one or two items, you said, it's except for.
Yeah, I think
Lake
the
Point.
confusion might be that there are standards in the Lake Point district.
Right.
And then it also falls back on like parking garages, lighting standards. Those are all in the standard code of Chapter 2. And so the Lake Point district falls back on those landscaping.
Right,
So
so-
just for the residential, that does not apply to the Lake Point district. Does that make sense? So like the non-residential section would in the Lake Point code. So if you have a non-residential development, you would have to follow those non-residential landscaping standards.
But not the Lake Point. See, I would think
Yes,
that the
for
Lake Point redevelopment.
Non-residential
code would
and
stand
Lake
on its
Point.
own. I guess that's where I'm at. I mean, it would stand on its own and it wouldn't have to be an exception in this particular document. Because you're not referencing in this document other than just saying it's not for this particular item.
So that's how all of our special districts are, and the standard ones. They all fall back on those extra regulations. So again, the parking garages, lighting standards, landscaping, off-street parking, all of those apply to all of our districts. That's why those exceptions are in there to
So they're
say.
overlapped is what you're saying.
Exactly, because it doesn't speak to that in the Lake Point code.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Okay.
that made sense.
Okay, good.
glad we got there.
So I'll ask, is there anything in these proposed changes that you, or in particular, obviously, we've read them, we can focus on them, but is there anything of particular that you're looking for our feedback on?
No, not really. It was just as we were going back through the code, there were things that were like, this isn't really in alignment with the vision and the intent of the district, like that 20-foot garage setback. We were like, that's kind of excessive. Or the 10-foot wide sidewalk, we were like, that's excessive. If we're saying this is a dense, more walkable environment, we just felt those things weren't in alignment, so we wanted to change them.
Okay.
The other items just come from a chart of kind of long-standing, we come across a regulation and there might be a direct conflict here or there, or something that doesn't quite make sense, or maybe there's just a rewording that needs to happen. Or again, where, now we have 2 sets of regulations that are applying to Lake Point on accident. We need to accept them from the standard one so they can follow their own, in their own section. So it's just kind of cleaning up a little bit of the code.
Okay, how about the wine bar? Is that a cleanup thing too?
That one's not a cleanup thing.
No, that again is going back to the feedback that we've been getting from the citizen satisfaction survey, from property owners who are wanting to redevelop their commercial sites, from the direction that we've been giving that redevelopment is a top priority. This is us trying to continue that effort to allow for new uses.
Okay, and am I hearing you correctly that you received that feedback from both on the developer side and on the existing resident side as a
So the resident sites from the citizen satisfaction survey, we saw that it was very important to residents and choosing Sugar Land, that having access to restaurants and entertainment, and then also from the property owners, the commercial property owners, that they're wanting to redevelop, they're wanting these new uses, but they find that zoning is a barrier to getting them there.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
With the wine bar specifically, does this mean that there'd have to be potential updates then to PDs or?
No.
No?
Because PDs, most of them follow the SIC codes. They have eating and drinking places.
Okay.
Jessica, is there, a bar, I believe, is 50% of their sales are derived from alcohol. What, is there a different definition for wine?
Yeah, so they're going to have different licenses. So that's why, and the definition.
Yeah, it has
Went
the
too far.
W.
You can only have a wine and malt beverage retailer's permit. So you're not allowed to sell liquor.
So no liquor. Got it. Is there a wine, is there a food requirement? Okay. Thanks.
Any other
Well, I
questions?
hope there's food.
They have the
Not a
option to.
requirement.
They have the option to, but it's not required per this definition.
I heard the citizen feedback wanted restaurants, so, no, I'm just kidding. All right. Any other questions for staff? Okay. I will make a motion that we recommend approval of the proposed amendment to chapters 2 and 10 of the Land Development Code with the condition that the language regarding residential landscaping in the Lake Point Redevelopment District is moved from section 2-385 to section 2-384.
Second.
We've got a second from Commissioner Brown. Any further discussion? Please vote. That passes unanimously among the commissioners present. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, staff, for the presentations. And we will move on to item 6A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Reports. There are about 14 meetings listed here. And I'm just going to do this as a free-for-all. If you covered one of these meetings and you have a report, raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and you can tell us what meeting. You may go first, Commissioner Newwood.
Okay, I attended, I think, 416th meeting. There's nothing to report with regards to planning and development. There was some public comment. One opposed, half a dozen or so came up and asked for a resolution for the mayor to put a resolution out there to cease fire in Gaza. That's it.
Okay, thank you. AP?
I had the March meetings, and there was nothing material except for March 26th, where council had the first consideration to amend the planned development districts that eliminated the uses of tobacco, hookah, and vape retail stores, and that passed unanimously on the first consideration.
Okay,
That was it.
thank you. Any other reports? All right. 6B, city staff report.
I was hiding. We don't have anything much, just that our regularly scheduled meeting would be May 14th. We're likely going to be canceling that. We don't have any items slated right now, and several of us are going to be at a conference. So we'll likely be canceling the May 14th, but we will let you know for sure in communication.
All right,
All right,
thank you.
thank you.
Any further business? I've got a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll give it to Commissioner Smith on this one. And that motion passes. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you.